Welcome to Sports from the Couch.
I gotta say, it's the stupidest thing in sports.
With your host, Mike Mercado.
Players cannot stand him. Coaches cannot stand him. Most importantly, the fans can't stand him.
Brought to you by Mercado Airwaves.
I'm gonna say it once, and hopefully I'm wrong, but it's a disaster waiting to happen.
That is so bad, that is absolutely brutal.
Hello and welcome in, friends, to another edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and I want to thank you so much for making us a part of your Monday, May 17th, 2021. I hope each and every one of you had a wonderful, safe weekend. And on today's edition of Sports from the Couch, the NBA season has come to an end for Chicago Bulls fans and the Chicago Bulls organization. And I want to talk about how the season ended and what we're going to get come in the play-ins for the NBA playoffs. It should be an exciting time. We have some interesting matchups and some interesting things to talk about your Chicago Bulls along with the rest of the NBA. But before we get to all that, let's take care of some housekeeping notes. You can follow us all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and you can be interactive with the show on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. Like, rate, review, and shares wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us and like us on Facebook and on YouTube. You can see our pretty faces on the video versions of the podcast, wherever you get your favorite video format, and Facebook, and of course on YouTube at Mercado Airwaves. Teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves. We have some swag. You can become a producer. You can get early access. You can become a friend of the network at Patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. So let's get right into it. Enough burying the lead. The NBA season is heading into the postseason. The playoffs will begin, and now there's a big difference between the postseason and the playoffs because, as we know, there's a play-in. And the Chicago Bulls actually were trying to get into the play-ins for the Eastern Conference, fell just a little bit short, whether it was Zach LaVine getting sick and them running out of steam, whether it was Washington going on a crazy run with Russell Westbrook. There's a lot of things that happened that made the Bulls the 11th seed and finish off the season without a playoff appearance, without a play-in appearance, and a record of 31-41. Now, before the Vucevic trade, right, I think most of us would have been really happy with a team winning over 30 games, this Bulls team in particular. But then after you make the trade, you have two All-Stars, Zach was balling out, you wanted, and you thought you were going to see the 6th seed, right? That's what even Thaddeus Young was talking about, to avoid the play-in. And then at the end of the season, you know, what made things interesting for Bulls fans, and I think a lot of teams around the NBA, is this potential for the play-in. So we're going to get into what that means nationally in just a little bit. But I want to talk about a little bit of what is next for the Chicago Bulls. 31-41, you missed the playoffs. A lot of different things, a lot of intangibles were learned and saw and played itself out in this season. And I think, first off, we've talked about it a lot. And it's something a lot of us have mentioned, but we didn't want to make excuses, and the team isn't making excuses. And I don't think beat reporters are, and fans. This team was not the same without Zach LaVine. And if it was for Zach, there's a good chance this team is not only in the play-in, but maybe has a chance to outright make the playoffs. Okay, granted, it wasn't looking that way with Zach, but all things were on the table at that point. So you lose Zach, and your team is starting to gel in its own way. And while that's happening, development of guys was either stagnant, stopped, or grew. For example, stagnant, Pat Williams. And we've heard a lot of it since the end of the season, since the last few games. We've heard Billy Donovan talk about we need Patrick Williams, and that's them as the we. We need him to take those shots, to be a little bit more selfish. He's in the big leagues now. He's in the NBA. And it became stagnant. You know, what was such a high hope in the beginning of the season, and with all the raw talent, and we see it all in front of us, right? Where if you were building a character, Pat Williams is perfect when it comes to an NBA player. But we did see some drop-off towards the end of the season, especially in the second half. So we'll see how that develops into next year. Somebody who I think degressed, if that's the proper term, unless the last few games, was Lauri Markkanen. While Zach LaVine was gone, this has been one of our biggest conversations here on Sports from the Couch with Mike Mercado, is you had the opportunity to step up. While you had some kind of a regression, we saw Kobe White progress in his growth during this time that Zach was gone. And it has become apparent that whether or not Kobe White is the starting point guard of the Chicago Bulls, this dude is going to be a killer when it comes to scoring in the NBA. And he is a wonderful piece to have on your team. And now that you kind of have an idea of what you could do with him, and he's figured out that 1-1, that 1-2 game with Vooch, being able to play that pick and roll, that pick and pop, like there's a lot to that. And you're seeing that the chemistry is gelling together and that he's learning to play with these other guys. Now, whether he's going to learn to help facilitate and make them grow as players, that's different. And there is a real conversation that we're going to get to about what to do at the point guard position moving forward. But those three stars, those three young men, they each had different stories, different story arcs in their own season here for the Chicago Bulls. And a lot of it, we haven't talked a lot about it here on the show. Some people have, especially if you're deep in the know when it comes to ball, is Billy Donovan's coaching. There was a time when we thought he lost Kobe White and Lauri Markkanen. And Mo Cheeks taking Kobe under his wing and teaching him, it definitely has helped. You've seen it. So, I think for the first year and all the turmoil that was going on, people have given Billy a break and haven't given him a hard time. Do I think that he's been perfect? No. But I think all things being equal, he has handled a lot of things well. He has experimented. We have seen growth in a lot of players, and Zach LaVine has taken the next step. You brought in another all-star. Your coaching staff was legitimate, and you could sell that to incoming free agents and different players around the league. I think you could complain and have criticism of Billy Donovan if we want to get to the minutiae and the real details. But all in all, I think it was a very successful season for Billy Donovan, even with these three players and three different points in their development. So that's what I took out from the last few weeks of the season. And then, moving forward, you're going to have Vucevic, you're going to have Zach LaVine. It's interesting if they're going to do something with Daniel Theis. Because Daniel Theis might have played himself into a contract with somebody else in the NBA. I mean, he's balled out. And this was a guy that was starting in big games in Boston. So 4 years in the league, European player, people are finally starting to see what he's about. It's going to be interesting to see if the Bulls can afford him. I don't know what they're going to do with Lauri Markkanen. We've talked about it here. I've gone both sides of the fence. I can make the argument of why you keep him. I can make the argument about why you move on. The hardest part, though, is regardless of what the situation is, you're going to feel a little empty-handed. Because if you pay him a lot of money, then you're paying him for something that he hasn't done and you're hoping he's going to do. And if you don't pay him and you let him walk away, you didn't get any assets back, and he might turn out to be something big, something great somewhere else. So you're really in a tough spot unless you just get a sweet money deal, which Lauri might have played himself into because he hasn't done anything necessarily to get that big contract. The caveat when it comes to all this, Daniel Theis, Lauri Markkanen, whether you're going to pay somebody else, match somebody, is there's a lot of money in the NBA right now that needs to get distributed to players. And with a lot of the big name star players already opting in or signing new contracts, people are going to get paid. People are going to get overpaid. So it's interesting to see where this roster is going to end up filling out. You're going to lose, I think, Garrett Temple, Denzel Valentine, Arcidiacono might be one more year. He's gone after this. You're losing Felicio. So you're going to have some money. But you're also going to give up some depending on contracts that you're moving on. But what's really fascinating is the player that's not on this roster. Because obviously, with the Vooch trade is you probably aren't going to end up in the first round. And if you're lucky to end up as a top 4, great. And it's funny, we'll talk about that for a second. I mentioned this to my boss at the radio station, that this Bulls team has a weird identity crisis that I don't think it realizes yet. Or maybe it does, and they're trying to maneuver it. Vooch and Zach, young men, but in NBA terms, they got some miles in them. Not a lot of playoff miles, but they're getting older. So that's your 2 all-stars. 2 all-stars. 60 points between the two of them any given night. They're older. They're in their late 20s and early 30s. Then you look at Kobe White, Patrick Williams, a guy who's going to be 21 and a guy who's going to be 20. You have a mixture. There's not this common nucleus that you're seeing like in other teams. So, with that in mind, what do you do come free agency when it comes to point guard? Let's say you don't get the chance to draft one in the top 4. What do you do? Do you go after Lonzo Ball, who's younger, isn't as developed as you would think he would be compared to some of the veteran point guards? And while he answers a lot of your questions, does he put you over the top? Or do you go after a veteran like a Chris Paul or a Mike Conley Jr. and just try to bank that you could get 1, maybe 2 years off of those classic cars? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where it becomes interesting for AK and Mark Eversley in that front office for the Chicago Bulls. Because Arturas Karnisovas, we know the dude's an assassin when it comes to executives. He's going to make his move. He's going to target his guys. He's going to do what he needs to. Eversley has this eye for scouting, so I trust them, but I'm fascinated to see where they go. Do they go all in on the youth? Do they go all in with the all-stars? Or do they hope that one of the youthful guys gets to their level? Do they bring in another veteran and try to transition over the years to the younger guys? Let me know your thoughts. What do you think about that scenario? I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media. Be interactive with the show on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll put this bad boy up on the screen. That is right. We have ourselves the postseason and the play-ins, the playoffs. First things first, I've heard this a few times before we actually get to the matchups. The two things of, is this playoffs? Does this count as playoffs? Whatever. This is the postseason. These are the play-ins. This isn't the playoffs. Okay, so there is a distinction, if you will, of these two. So we are in the postseason. These 10 teams in the West, these 10 teams in the East have made it to the postseason. But only 8 and 8 will make the playoffs. That's to me how I interpret this. Up to you. It's all dumb. It doesn't matter. But I've seen the conversation. Next thing. Is this good for the NBA? Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. Look, for the long part of this season, the Chicago Bulls, a big market, were in the conversation. The New York Knicks, Washington, Indiana, Memphis, San Antonio, New Orleans, LA, Golden State. Like, there was a lot of teams, a lot of big markets that were in there. And of course, that's because 7 and 8 in each conference was also part of this play-in. But it did bring some excitement. It did allow you to dream and hope. This is where the caveat on that double-edged sword thing comes into play. It depends on the conference and the situation. Because I look at what we're getting in the Eastern Conference, and no team that makes it in through the play-in and are the 7 and 8 teams going into the playoffs are really scaring me or making me believe that they could go for the NBA Finals and that they're going to get to the championship and win it. In the Western Conference, that's not the case. You can make an argument about the Lakers, obviously. They're the favorite. They're the betting favorite still, even though they're in a one-game elimination. Golden State, how can you deny Steph Curry? And we have some interesting younger teams when it comes to both the Wizards and Boston, specifically Boston. It's like, what do you do in that one? What about Charlotte? It's like, those are young ones, but they're not going to win the finals. That's what's exciting. Compared to the Western Conference, where there's legitimate guys that could win a championship. And I'm looking at it right here. We have Memphis and San Antonio. Speaking of youth in Memphis, it's like, yeah, they might not win a finals, but think about what it means to them to be able to play in a game against San Antonio. Think about what it means to have a team like San Antonio back in these play-ins. It's all about the matchup and the circumstances and the narrative that we want to build these stories on. And I hear you. I hear you, NBA Twitter. I hear you, NBA YouTube, NBA podcast world. I'm with you that if the Lakers lose, it might not be the best for Adam Silver and the NBA office, right? Because you're losing the Lakers so early. But that's what makes this so fascinating. Because all of a sudden, it's no longer just the Lakers and the Nets, right? It's all off one game. Now, the Lakers can go out and win this whole thing. I think the Lakers are going to win this game and they're going to move forward. But what makes it intriguing and what makes it pay off is the idea that Steph Curry can go off. And if Anthony Davis has a back spasm, or LeBron James at his age with literally years of playing minutes just in the playoffs alone, and that body break down just a little bit or just that slower, Steph Curry has a huge night, drops 6 threes. Makes it fascinating. Whether that's good for the NBA, I don't know. But I find it entertaining as a fan. Long term, that's the future's problem. But when we get these games, it is going to be so much fun. And also, I want to let you guys all know, as is usual per tradition, we will be doing a bracket, and I will give you my results, my predictions as we get to the NBA Finals this summer. That will be coming out after the playing games, but I will give you the actual information if you're looking for it, if you need to know to plan your night around some awesome basketball. It will be the 10th seeded Charlotte Hornets will be on the road to face the Indiana Pacers in Game 1. That's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by the 8th seeded Washington Wizards at the number 7 Boston Celtics. That is at 9 Eastern. Both games on TNT. That should be really exciting. And then the Western Conference play-in matchups will be on Wednesday with the number 9 seed Memphis Grizzlies hosting the number 10 San Antonio Spurs at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN, followed by a matchup between LeBron James and Stephen Curry as the defending champions, the LA Lakers, host the Golden State Warriors. That is at 10 Eastern on ESPN. That is the number 7 versus the number 8 matchup. Really fast, I will go with the Wizards beating the Boston Celtics. And I will go with Charlotte beating Indiana. So Charlotte and Boston will move on to the playoffs for the Eastern Conference. And in the Western Conference, I will go with the LA Lakers beating the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies beating San Antonio. Memphis and LA move on to the Western Conference playoffs. With that, let me know your thoughts. How do you think this all goes down? Do you like the play-ins? Did you think it was good for your team? Do you think it was good for the NBA regular season? Do you think while it was good for the NBA regular season, will it hurt the NBA postseason if the Lakers get bounced in a one-game elimination? And are you excited about the NBA playoffs? Make sure you join us as we make our predictions, and you can let us know yours all over the universe on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and you can be interactive with the show on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. But I think with that, guys, that's it. It is over with. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday. Make sure you're following us all over the universe on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media. The show's on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk, and the network is on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Like, rate, review, and share us wherever you get your favorite podcasts at Mercado Airwaves. Become a producer of the show at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Check out our swag, teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves, and check out the video version of the podcast on facebook.com/Mercado Airwaves and on youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Check out all the shows on the network: Two Nerds of a Feather, The Good Brothers, The Gone Missing Podcast, our sister podcast that spotlights missing people that did not get national attention, and all our interviews with athletes and celebrities. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Enjoy all the games. We will see you next time here on Sports from the Couch on the Mercado Airwaves Network. I'm Mike Mercado.